I'm just really hoping that it will work out. It is a gamble because it's not normal for the vast majority of ARPGs, but it's a gamble that at least someone in my position, I'm happy to make it.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure today that I get to have a dev interview around Titan Quest II. So without further ado, would you mind introducing yourself, who you are, your position, and what you do?
Hi there, I'm Balint Martin. I'm the lead systems designer on Titan Quest II at Grimlore Games. I manage a large team of systems designers who are largely responsible for the moment-to-moment gameplay that you experience.
How large is your team?
It's around 7 people at the moment, but the entire studio is 50 people if you count all the contractors. It's bigger when we get the temporary help from our sister studios.
Titan Quest is kind of a unique game. It's very, classical style ARPG, and in, 2025, a lot of them have gone like seasonal style games, much more live service type of stuff. Is it difficult to create kind of a classical style ARPG as the ARPG like meta of what an ARPG is has shifted?
No, because it goes back to our roots. So for Grimlore, the studio, they've done Spellforce 3 beforehand, which was an ARPG slash RTS mixture. And they've done that in a very much classic format as well. Single player first. There was some multiplayer in there, but no microtransactions, no Darth microtransactions, nothing like that. And it's pretty much the same thing now, except we're doing an early access instead of releasing too soon, as unfortunately has happened with Spellforce 3.
Do you find the need to have any kind of new spin, new drawing factor at all?
Yeah, Grimlore's DNA also includes that the games there's some depth to them, right? There's got to be some level of complexity, some level of challenge. That's just intrinsic. With Titan Quest 2, we're trying to bring that a little bit into the ARPG genre, but we're also just trying to reinforce the classic feel of it while still making it feel not dated and modern.
What do you think the definition of a classical ARPG is to you?
I think you have to just reinforce the loop of progression. That's the key of it. So you gotta give the player the little dopamine hits every now and then with finding better loot. The combat should be satisfying, but we're trying to actually go a little bit further with that. We can talk about that in a second, I guess. You have a story that you can progress through, sure, but then you still want to go further. You want to build your ultimate character and find better loot moment to moment, optimize everything, and become essentially invincible. That's, I think, the core loop that tickles it for most players.
So let's talk about progression for a moment. What's your favorite part of progression in an ARPG as a systems designer?
I'll tell you mine personally is just unlocking more skills. I like to play wide rather than very focused. That's my personal style, just playing a bit of a piano. In terms of as a designer, what I find much more interesting is the optimization that you can do with our dual mastery system, right? Because you can essentially pick your direction, eventually converge on something that the two masteries synergize in, which is something that you can't do in other ARPGs. So for us, that's my favorite part. But in other ARPGs, I would say I enjoy just the raw experience of the first playthrough and figuring everything out.
Do you find it hard at all to maintain the balance since you have the mastery system of one can interact with the other? Do you come into things where oh, well, we got to be careful because this mastery has this in it and it could interact with this in a potentially unforeseen way?
We're actually building a new one right now. So we're in the very early stages of it. And that has exactly come up today. So it's funny you should ask. It is challenging. You got to make sure that you don't overlap, that you don't accidentally reintroduce concepts that we've already done in some slightly different way. It's got to satisfy players in terms of building the synergies that are satisfying and interesting, and not just X ability gives you Y bonus and then you exploit it with Z ability. It's got to be more deep than that. There's got to be intrinsic stuff to it that just naturally synergizes, not just in numbers, but gameplay feel.
Does sticking to classical archetypes when you're designing, like you say you're designing a new mastery right now, so when you're sticking to classical archetypes, for instance, I don't know, just a mage, for instance, does it help you out more than it hinder you? Do you feel like the guidelines of, okay, well, it's a mage, so we can go with mage themed things, that will be easy enough? Or do you find it somewhat limiting because maybe you have a crazy idea you want to put in there, you're it kind of doesn't fit the archetype?
In our instance, it can be limiting because we are trying to make it so that you can go all sorts of directions with your attributes, armor, and weapons.
Sure.
So we have to make sure that we support every angle in these areas, and that's not an easy thing to do. One of our core mantras is that we keep emphasizing the player's freedom in every single area of the game. That's from these choices that I just mentioned to respecs and the actual ability cycle in the moment-to-moment gameplay.
I thought it was funny that you mentioned like Piano Flask, style of gameplay, right? And because that is something that is a line that is drawn sometimes. People want one button builds, or some people like kind of the methodical, like I'm going to do this and interacts with this style. In ARPGs, it can be, hard to be able to have two different types of, patterns of vector of power like interact together, because everyone wants to put all of the power in like one thing. Like, why would you build half in the power in one thing and half in the power in the other thing when you can just like do the one button? So when you're actually designing these, do you find it difficult to make sure that you can do that style of piano gameplay, or is it something where it's like maybe it just sounds harder than it actually is and it's quite easy for you to manage?
It sounds harder than it is. So here's the thing. When I'm talking about the piano build in Titan Quest 2, we're talking about one or two core abilities that are damaging, and maybe one of them is primarily damaging and the other one applies some sort of affliction, right? The others should be supportive. They should be curses or something to that effect. And basically you make sure that, yeah, you have to utilize these multiple abilities. Some might be on cooldown, some might be limited by mana or another tertiary resource like our recent Forge Master with the Divine Cores that you use to summon the all sorts of devices you've got. But the point really is that you build this natural synergy and then get to execute on the battlefield. That doesn't mean, though, that we don't support the one-button gameplay. If you want to make your new Fourth Centuries OP, that's probably happened.
Yeah.
We got to look at that. What do you like to play, actually?
Well, I actually like ailments. Like, so I like the whole,
very good.
poison, bleed, ailment thing was kind of what I played. I did the whole like auto homing mage build, that everyone was playing at the beginning too. I played that too. And then I just was last night, I was kind of, prepping a little bit for the interview. And so I was playing the new Forge class. And I was playing, like you mentioned, like the centuries, that you go to the ballistas basically, like, so it was like that seemed like pretty fun as well. But I find myself being prone in ARPGs to like ailment style, bleed, poison. Like I like that archetype for sure.
Yeah, that's fun. And if you manage to stack multiple types of those, it gets exponentially stronger over time, and then you can find exploitation skills as well to connect. So plenty of opportunities even with just very few buttons.
How many buttons is like too many buttons? Like at what point do you go, okay, well I think we've gone too far down the rabbit hole. We got too many buttons. Like, is there a line in development when you're creating? You're like, okay, we got to like be kind of careful that we're not getting a little too complicated.
I would personally draw the line at the player filling the secondary skill bar.
Okay.
You can like swap between those as you exchange your weapon to your second slot weapon, and then you've got the second skill bar. If people really build into that, I mean, we allow it, but we don't design the game for it.
Well, I'm glad you bring that up, because one of my questions was like, one of the nice things about Titan Quest is that it is simple enough to get into. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to sit there and like study spreadsheets or watch like 5 videos. You can pick it up. You can make a character. You can enjoy the game in and of itself without having to have exterior factors. How do you walk the line between making ARPG simple enough that, a guy can get into it and play it, but complicated enough that you draw them in for a meaningful amount of hours?
So I'm very happy you're asking that, because that was exactly the purpose of our gameplay design. We really wanted to make sure that it's easy to understand, that you can go wrong and correct it with the respec system. But as to how you kind of stop the player from going too far off track, we basically limit the amount of stuff we offer at once. So, we slowly introduce each mastery. We give you a little bit of time until you can expand on that. Even then, we further limit it by not giving you too many divinity points to reach the next tier within your ability tree. So you will be spending those 10, 12 hours until you unlock every single skill that we currently offer. And we're actually looking to slightly expand our skill tree to include a fifth tier at some point. That will be for passives, but still. By the time you experience all the progression, you'll have spent a good amount of time, and by that time, we think you'll understand the game pretty well, even as a newer player to ARPGs.
So when you're doing kind of the higher tier skills, do you guys feel a little bit more freedom to make things maybe a little bit more complicated?
Not necessarily. So just because a skill is in the low tiers doesn't mean that it can't have complicated side effects. So for example, Rogue's Mark for Death is pretty low in the tiers, right? But you can use it for pretty much anything. It's amazing.
So kind of along the same lines of thought here, one of the things that I really enjoy about Titan Quest 2 is that it is a handcrafted world. Like a lot of ARPGs, and not necessarily saying anything bad, but they're kind of generated, right? And they are handcrafted to a point, but then it's generated with some sort of randomness. But Titan Quest 2 is like fully handcrafted.
Yes.
How do you deal with being able to create a fully handcrafted world that also includes the possibility of continual replayability? Do you find that difficult when you guys are creating something that can be experienced and basically consumed, but yet still requires replayability since it is an ARPG?
Well, you see, I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with doing a not handcrafted and mostly generated game. That can be okay. That can offer some degree of variety, right? But we are Grimlore, and we have our own way of doing things. Also, Spellforce 3 was like this, that it was fully handcrafted. And let me tell you, it is a lot of hard work. It ends up being very pretty, very high fidelity in terms of the visuals. But you bring up this very correct point that it's a one-off experience pretty much that you might repeat in order to explore the extra characters that you can put together with the different masteries and whatnot. Go for a hardcore run, whatever you want to do. That's fine. But we got to do further. I can already hear the comments in my head when endgame. Well, first we have to finish making the game. It will happen. We really do plan for this, and we want to give you a lot of grindable stuff to work towards.
Yeah, since you bring up in-game, that does make me curious. How do you tackle an in-game in that style of classical ARPG? How do you guys have plans you're willing to share? They don't have to go into detail or anything, but what's the philosophy more so behind actually designing an in-game of the game of this nature?
Well, step one, we have to complete our game. The campaign has to be done. That is why you're not seeing it right now. I know people already want it, but guys, we're not ready. I'm sorry. It will happen, however. As for the philosophy of the design, I would say what's really important is that you have a reason to keep coming back to it. We're not going to be a seasonal game, but we are going to offer you extra progression within it. We will offer you areas to go to where you can farm, and you will be doing different sorts of activities. And one of our very core systems that is already to a degree available, but is still missing pieces is the ritual system. You can use this at the moment to tweak your own difficulty and get harder monsters, which also will drop more better loot. Well, we're nowhere near done with showing you guys what is possible with that system, so we'll go into that further. We've recently introduced the relic and charm items, which are extremely farmable, and you're going to be spending a lot of time unlocking them all and getting the configuration you want. We'll be adding a whole lot more of those, and we'll add further complexity on top. As the Titan Quest 1 crew will already know, that means artifacts and maybe more. We'll see how far we'll exactly push it, but this kind of stuff is definitely happening. It's on our radar, just no timelines yet.
So just kind of a question related to development of games more so in general. Because you guys are really focused on, we need to complete the game first. I understand you guys want infinite replayability right now, but, we really need to get the campaign completed. We need to get that done, and then we can tackle, future. You're doing it chronologically. It makes sense, right? Do you feel like the focus on games in general at the point of, okay, we're going to go into early access. It's a live service game. People expect, demand even, infinite replayable pretty much from day one of early access. Do you feel like this mindset has hindered or made difficult the process of creating games in general? Not so much your company, but just as a process of creating games in general. What's your thought on that?
I think so. to a degree. It doesn't matter how many times I will say that we are a classic type of game with Titan Quest 2, right? We're trying to make a classic style ARPG that is not live service in any way. We do support it, we do make new content, and we try to patch it as frequently as is feasible for us, but we are not live service. And I know that there's an expectation for us to do ever larger patches and updates and content drops. But ultimately, it's all very simple. Like all our philosophies are, to be honest, very, very simple. That's really our super weapon, that we keep everything as simple as possible. We'll just have to do the best that we can with what we have.
Do you guys have key metrics for success? So when you're looking at the game, and obviously there's sales and player retention and things like that, but like when you're looking at the game, what is it really that for you means we are being successful?
I think review scores are definitely among there. And if we can retain players, if we gain a base that is willing to keep replaying and explore the different avenues of what we are offering, I think that's just super cool and makes me feel all fuzzy inside. all the classic metrics, obviously, of sales and whatnot, that's ultimately what's going to determine the future course of our game.
Quick question for you on the topic of feedback. You said reviews or kind of things that can make you feel warm and fuzzy. How do you balance between, let's say you have a firm vision for something in your game design, philosophy, what you're doing, what you truly believe, and then you get feedback from players that can directly conflict with your own vision of what it should be? How do you balance these, and how do you come to a conclusion?
It can be tough. Sometimes certain feedback is way out of our scope of addressing, right? That's just normal game industry stuff. You can't please everybody. To a degree, I do believe in the creative freedom of the designer to more or less do what they want, but they also need to keep into account the player's expectations. We have to strike a balance in the middle where we do what we can with what we have. Practicality has to be at the core of everything. If we can address popular feedback, we will do so.
Speaking of development and thought process, because kind of the same question came up in another interview with a different dev from a different game, and what he stated was, he said that the game has to be fun for me. Like if I'm playing the game that I'm making, basically, and I'm paraphrasing him here, but he's like, if I'm playing the game I'm making and it's not fun for me, like what am I actually doing? Like how often do you find yourself in this same mindset where you believe, if I'm playing the game and it's not fun, there's something wrong?
I'd ask the designer if they've played a game that was very work in progress and it was buggy. Could they not identify the fun in those states? Because I think there has to be an internal vision that you as a gamer see before your mind's eye, before the thing exists. As you put a game together, it's going to be a mess. And gradually, day by day, you make it into a solid experience that becomes fun. That is my view on this. It's a lot of hard work. It doesn't happen immediately. And when something doesn't quite work and isn't fun, we don't discard it. We iterate it until it is. Sometimes it doesn't work out, but you gotta take the chance,
Fair enough. Do you find it for yourself personally hard to not go too crazy with system designs? Like, do you sometimes come up with some wild ideas and you're like, oh man, I really want to like try to get this idea in, but you kind of have to rein yourself back a little bit?
I think that ranges from cut systems to little features that you tweaked because code tells you that it would take 5 weeks of a coder's time to implement it, and then we're like, oh no, let's not do that. Let's make it simpler.
Yeah, fair enough. It is the theme, it's in and of itself, of like Greek mythology, right? Like, does that sometimes limit your design space as well?
No, because we're actually in a way expanding on it. So what we've done is we've grimlorified Greek mythology, to be honest. Sure. And that means that we do get to add in these fantasy elements like the skellies and whatnot. Titan Quest 1 did this, so we have very good legacy reasons for doing that, but it does allow us to be creative. And Greek mythology mixes humanoid body shapes with animal physiques all the time. So we are going to actually keep adding these humanoid animal hybrids, chimeras, if you like, a lot going forward. But we'll also do the classic mythological tropes. You'll see in just a few days after this video goes live, there will be an update, something about people like horses.
Okay. All right, a little bit of a teaser there. Do you have a favorite twist you guys have done on the mythology? You say you kind of do your own little bit of twist. You got a favorite one?
I think that the gods are kind of cowards and they left. It gives the hero the space to act and to become relevant. And this whole zero to hero path becomes stronger through that, in my opinion.
So I want to ask you a question about bosses. What is the position of bosses in Titan Quest 2? Like, what is the vision for what you want bosses to be as the experience for the average player going through? Would you be able to lay out to me like the concept behind what you want bosses to be in Titan Quest 2?
We don't actively differentiate in a player-facing way our mini bosses and our bosses.
Okay.
So there's world bosses, we call them, the big ones. But the small ones, which was actually one of the ones you did critique, that like the Griffin,
Sure.
that's a mini boss. This is our cheap boss. And what you did like was Pan, our big world boss for chapter 1, which I was very happy to hear because we did put a lot of work into that. And really the experience with the bosses, and we haven't fully achieved this yet. We have to go back to our balancing to make sure it is like that, but we'll do that. Anyway, what it should be is that you spend up to a minute and a half in the lower DPS cases, and it's really this hard back and forth. You have to evade certain boss abilities. They're gonna litter the arena with all sorts of stuff that is dangerous to you, and you get in your damage in your little windows, running around a lot, speccing into heavy armor and resistances where necessary. Anyway, you find your way to defend against that, and you have this back and forth for a minute to a minute and a half. It should be challenging, but it shouldn't be frustrating. And that's a difficult little thing to find. But fortunately, because we're an open world game, you know what? You can just go and level up, come back later, deal with it when you're more powerful. Or you can use the rituals and straight up level them down if you find it too tough. Your stat scaling will just absolutely carry you in such an instance. But if you are bored and it does nothing for you, then you can go the opposite way. You can fight underleveled and you can overlevel the boss.
I'm glad you bring up the point about defenses, particularly against a boss, because a common trope in ARPGs this day and age can be, why would I worry about defenses? Why would I just not get more damage and then just kill the boss literally instantly as the solution? So how do you solve the problem of the answer in an ARPG almost always be just get more damage in Titan Quest 2?
We will solve it with scaling. So this is not in place right now, but this is what I meant, that the intended boss fight duration would be 1 minute. And maybe if you really do go for damage and you end up being a bit of a glass cannon, you'll do it in 40 seconds. But the point is, you will experience the entirety of what the boss has to offer. You'll fight all the phases. You'll see all the abilities hitting you, or hopefully you dodge them. But you get what I mean. What we have to achieve is that the scaling needs to be in line with what the boss is capable of, and your damage shouldn't outdo what the boss can take. If it does, you're overleveled or we've messed up.
Can it be difficult to find space for the difference between builds that are like really good at clearing trash mobs, but then you also like have it sounds like a very specific vision, like we want the boss to be roughly approximately this long in terms of how the boss fight is, and you need to be able to beat it. Like, how do you pair the idea of like, okay, we want characters that can actually like farm and kill trash mobs like quickly, but they also need good single target DPS like at the same time, and you're mandated to kill these bosses because it's a campaign kind of style of playthrough. Like, how often are you guys having to like constantly think about that when you're making your new builds?
Well, the worst case scenario is that if you over focus on mob clearing and you have a little bit too much AoE focus as opposed to single target damage, that the boss fights would take longer if you don't respec between them. That is entirely a player choice. You can very cheaply respec by just selling a handful of items if it comes to that. So I'm not particularly worried about this. But you are right that some bosses will just go faster because maybe the resistance profiles and your own damage profile works out in a way that favors you.
How often does other departments, such as narration, audio, map layout, like how often does the other departments sometimes inspire something that goes into like a systems design perspective?
Oh, a lot. We very frequently get requests from the content design department who are basically the guys making your quests, as well as just generally the flow of the campaign, right? And sometimes they come to us of we need this and that boss, and there's this and that small event that requires a unique creature. Could you make a variant of an Ichthian that's different than the others, but like more or less recognizable? Okay, this is how much that's going to cost. We can do that many of that type of requests. Make sure to let us know beforehand, and then we'll do it.
When you're making a layout of a map, like you're designing, kind of the next region and the corridors, etc. Like is it fairly difficult to design the mobs that are going to be that in a way that can't be overpowering? Because this is I talked to one layout designer for another game a while back, and he was saying that when he was creating layouts, he had to constantly think about the kinds of monsters that could inhibit these
Mhm.
layouts, and it could become overwhelming if you have the wrong combination. Is this something that comes up often?
That's right. So, I mean, I don't do this myself. I'm not a level designer, but we've had a lot of discussions. For example, I already teased the centaurs, right? And when the chapter where they're going to show up was made and just gray boxed together, we did have to talk a lot about what kind of abilities these guys will have. They're big, chunky, fast. They'll probably charge you. Have to give them enough space to exist and to not clump up too much because it takes away from their characteristics. So they did. There's a lot of open plains. There's a lot of arena-like areas or giant squares, and we're not going to put these guys very much into caves.
Speaking of layouts, and kind of map design, you guys have more verticality in your game than almost any other ARPG I can. In fact, I think you guys have the most. Was that an intentional thing, or is that something that just kind of ended up happening due to the nature of you guys are handcrafting the world and you wanted to be able to layer it with more content? Like, what was the process of basically coming to what we arrived at?
I think it's just very much part of our, blue ocean concepts, which is really that we wanted the world to be pretty. We wanted it to feel Greek. So really to capture the nature of the Aegean, you have to have cliffs. And it gave us this opportunity to do these beautiful camera flyovers with these wonderful vistas where you'd want to have a holiday if it wasn't for the nasty monsters, right?
Yeah.
So it was just a perfect opportunity. And as for the player, jumping between these spots or climbing up and down cliffs, it's just a nice way to break up combat a little bit. Gives you a bit of a break.
Since we're on the topic of art here, you guys also have a very high like color palette, and that might seem like a dumb statement when you think about it, but the reality, like a lot of the other RPGs are very monochromatic or like shy away from using deep color palette very often. I was kind of wondering why you think that is, and was this also intentional for you guys to really try to make it vivid like it is?
Part of the blue ocean plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just wanted to make it pretty, and we wanted to make it feel like real world Greece to the Greece. So there was a okay, it's larger than life, obviously. So we put an aspect of that in there. But yes, we just wanted it to feel welcoming. We wanted there to be daytime. We wanted there to be sunshine. It just makes the game a lot more pleasant to look at. We've had so much dark fantasy in the genre,
That's
so
true.
breaking that up a little bit and offering a bit of variety. We're trying to offer variety in all sorts of areas. But to be honest, Spellforge 3 was kind of dark fantasy, and Grimlore has done it there as well. It's got all these super pretty environments. It's got the daylight. It's also got its fair share of darkness and caves and caverns, but it's quite comparable, and I think it might just be part of Grimlore DNA at this point.
Visual clutter is a topic that kind of continually comes up in almost any RPG I play. Somewhere in the player base, there's people complaining about visual clutter and not being able to see what's going on, basically. Since you guys are early in the stage of development still in the game, is this something that you're building the game out with constantly on your mind, or do you think it's not really going to be as much of a problem for Titan Quest 2?
We're trying to keep our mobs smaller, so I believe that helps significantly.
Sure.
It's part of our core gameplay loop, really. Like with the bosses, we have a similar philosophy on the encounters that they're relatively small, and you've got these tiered creatures basically with different capabilities and abilities that you have to see. And we achieve that by giving you smaller numbers of enemies. But there are exceptions. Sometimes we flood you with crabs. Sometimes we toss a bunch of skeletons at you. But it's okay because I think our game is readable enough for that kind of stuff. But with our combat, yeah, we also have this little combat dance approach, which is actually inspired by the early Halo games' 30
Really?
seconds of fun loop, where in Halo you have to use your weapons, grenade, melee, and movement
Yeah.
to just get this 30 seconds of fun. But with our encounters, we have the similar idea of your skill usage, whatever that kit might be. Maybe mix in your weapon attacks if you have an energy draining build. You have your dodge, you have your barrier, but you can even just move out of the way and outposition yourself. We can only achieve this with smaller groups of enemies. So we really want to make sure that our encounters are engaging and the combat is active for us.
That's kind of cool to hear you took, that concept of inspiration from Halo. Do you have any other kind of, inspirational concepts that you've taken, been inspired by from other games like that?
We've looked at many, many, many references. So, for example, Diablo 4 was a great deal of UI inspiration. We were looking at a lot of that and then thinking about how we can do it in our style, how we can make it better, how can we suit our features. They also have, for example, the very easy respecking of skills, especially early
True.
on. And we've done that in a completely different way, though. So it's not necessarily the case that we nick the ideas, but it's inspirational, definitely.
You brought up the respec thing, I think like 3 different times. It seems like an important topic for you. Well, why is
It is.
respec so important to you in an ARPG?
In Titan Quest 1, you just couldn't. I'm triggered. That's it. That's
Fair.
really it. We really wanted to make it so that you don't have to make a new character if your attributes happen to be messed up, right? In Titan Quest 1, you had to. And very, very much down the line, they've added the potions to sort that out. They were difficult to obtain, but you could get it eventually. 15 years after the game was originally a thing. You get my pain, right?
Yeah. Okay, so I got a couple questions related to audio. George Lucas famously said that sound is 50% of the experience. Now, obviously, he's referencing cinema. Okay, but how much of this do you find true for ARPGs?
I think sound is the thing that really makes abilities click. So if it doesn't have a satisfying sound, you're not going to feel impact. And so we constantly pester our audio teams whenever anything doesn't quite feel right. I mean, they're really good at their job, so we rarely have to. But whenever it does happen, we do pester them that X needs to be more satisfying. We have to work on it. It has to feel crunchy. Because I know when it doesn't, we actually have this beta group that I'm sure you've heard of. We've gotten roasted for a few things very early on when they had placeholder audio, and rightfully so. I mean, we have to make everything feel satisfying. I think the abilities are a core of this, but also our story. Or our characters are voiced except your own player character. You don't actually say the lines that you're clicking on, but still, those are all very high quality. Voice actors, a lot of work has gone into that as well.
A common theme I've seen with audio, and Brad Fuller said it best. He said audio is the bad stepchild, and that it's there, but it's thought of last. Is that kind of true in that office as well for you guys? Like, is audio the one that's kind of like on the end of the chain of production?
Well, it's at the end because they have to see what they're making the audio for.
Sure.
In practical terms, yes, but in terms of importance, it's absolutely not the case. I left the best for last here. Comments I wanted to make. So we've got our audio director, Bastian. He also is our composer. And you know what he does? He procures all sorts of ancient Greek instruments.
Great.
He learns how to play them, and then he gets composing. We've also uploaded actually the main theme playthrough with our singer Aphrodita as well.
Whenever I talk to audio guys, they always seem to have an insane amount of passion and go into a crazy amount of depth, particularly the music guys too, when they go to make the music, seems like you guys have a similar thing over there where he's learning, getting actual instruments, learning to play them like, they're all the way in passion.
Yeah, I mean, that's no small feat, and I'm not sure everybody could do it, to be honest, but we're lucky. What can I say?
Okay, so class design. When you guys are introducing a new class, Is the temptation strong to make the class itself strong? And, do you constantly have to fight that with yourself?
I think we have a tendency to make stuff too strong. We don't have to fight that. I think we gotta play our own game more a little bit before things go out. That's like the biggest lesson. We certainly have no problem making sure that everything is usable.
So the other question I have is like, I played the Forge. It's pretty fun. I was curious why the Forge Mastery is the next one you wanted to do in particular. What was the decision of we're going to release the Forge?
It's defensive in nature. Like you got the offensive aspect of the items, but this is just completely different. And it allowed us to lay the foundations for summoning. More detailed summoning is coming. You will have actual creatures following you around. That's going to be our next one that we're working towards. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but
sure.
It will include all sorts of creatures.
All right, a couple questions related to game balance. I was reading through your patch notes just before the interview here. And I noticed you guys in particular were talking about item drops, how you wanted the item drops to be more catered towards the person you're actually playing. And I asked a couple streamer friends who I know had played through the game recently before the interview, just like, is there any questions you wanted to ask or something? And one of them actually brought up that he was playing through, he was doing casts and never got any wands, and that annoyed him. So can you walk us through the process of like, okay, you realized you needed better item drops, and how effective was that change for you?
It kind of didn't work the way we wanted.
Okay.
So, before release, there's a lot of last minute tweaking going on here and there. And we definitely found some mistakes after the fact, but it was a very last minute feature. This is just one of the chaotic aspects of what can go wrong with early access sometimes. Before Christmas, we did want to release something to the players, and this particular feature was actually very last minute. So a bit of chaos happened here. We will definitely be on top of this weighted loot system, however, and improve it significantly by the time we reach 1.0. So you should feel that you have a more tailored experience when you play this game. But it's not necessarily going to guarantee that you only get the stuff you want. So we still definitely want that aspect of randomness that is, intrinsic to some of the classic ARPGs, at least certainly Titan Quest. But we do want some amount of direction to come from your attribute picks.
And with the Charm System Edition, is that kind of fulfilling the role you wanted it to? How are you guys satisfied with the Charm System Edition?
Oh, we're just getting started. It's doing not even 20% of what we want. You'll see.
Okay.
Well, I did mention our active combat. I was actually wondering what you thought about that. Can you feel it already, or do we have more work to do on that front?
Did you guys change this during the update? Because I feel like I came back and replayed after the update, and it felt like definitely the mobs were scarier. That was like the takeaway that I got after the update. Like there was
we did buff the enemies, yes.
Okay, I definitely felt that then, because beforehand, to be quite honest, like when I was playing the mobs, I kind of just felt like everything's a trash mob. That's kind of how I felt. Just walk through you, you kill them, they just melt from. Maybe I was playing OP builds or something. I got lucky with the ones that I happened to play. But the two builds that I did play, the first playthrough was just like I'm just clicking the button, I go all the way to level 5, kill them no problem. And then this one, I was kind of doing the same thing. I was just walking forward, dropping, the ballista, or before that forget the actual one of it, like the hammer-den move that like basically spins around you. I was doing that stuff. And then by the time I got to like, I think it was like level 12, there was the guy that does the big slam, and he like one-shot me entirely. I was like, oh, like I actually have to play the game, So yeah, if you're asking if I felt the impact, I definitely felt the difference. Like it definitely felt scarier than me for sure.
Sounds good. And the follow-up to that is, do you think that has a place in the ARPG genre? Because I am really hoping it does. As a studio, I think we are hoping that it differentiates us a little bit. But if it was a persistent experience across your progression, that the enemies do remain scary, and you do have to actively, apply yourself to the combat.
I get where you're going with that. I do have a take on this, yeah. So like, okay, so if it depends upon the type of game you're doing, because you guys are doing like, okay, you're doing a campaign playthrough, it's consumable, you guys are doing an in-game system, but you're not there yet. So currently, when you're playing through a campaign, what you want is for the campaign itself to actually feel like you're doing something. If the whole campaign is I'm literally just doing like a Netflix movie and I'm just listening to the voice actors, which are good, by the way, and then I go and, I watch the next cutscene, the boss takes 2 seconds to kill, there's not much of a game there. You're kind of doing a walkthrough. You might as well watch a YouTube video. So if you're doing a campaign, yeah, I think there is room to have pushback on mobs. Absolutely no contest. I think where you would run into an issue is once people feel like they've earned the right to basically invalidate the power of a trash mob. And then if you scale the mobs indefinitely to always meet their power level, then effectively what you're telling the player is that, hey, you've accomplished nothing from level 1 to like level 50. Like you're the same level. So I think you have to be careful. And often how people, I feel like, solve this with the RPG is they start increasing the mob density. So it's like, okay, maybe the threat is increased by the amount of them, but they start, destroying them, and it's more satisfying because there's bigger explosions of mobs, etc. I don't know that you guys are necessarily that type of ARPG. Like my take on it isn't like you guys are going to be filling the screens with tons of mobs and like, explosions. Yeah, it's not really one of those. So I do think there is a place for it. I think once you've completed the campaign and you've got to the point of where basically what I'm doing is farming, starting to min-max my character, you have to be a little bit more willing to like let the player actually start dominating the mobs at some point, but only if they've earned the right to. Like the base level character can't necessarily just one-shot literally everything, but a well-built character with well-constructed items that, with good synergies that knows what they're doing should earn the right to be able to invalidate some of the portion of the experience for sure. But I don't think that adding some pushback is bad, particularly all the way up to the end of the campaign. I think is fine as long as I can still feel like I am getting stronger while maintaining some threat.
Yeah, thanks very much. Really appreciate your thoughts on that. And we had some very, very similar conversations among ourselves, and basically we want to make endgame the thing that breaks it. You do a little bit of endgame, you get your extra power increases from there. You are going to a degree invalidate the core gameplay. Absolutely.
So I think that's kind of where I came back to. Like I started asking about bosses, and like I was thinking about bosses because I was thinking like you go through mobs, and maybe it's just I'm too used to like a different style. Like you go through mobs, the mobs aren't really the challenge, and then you get to the boss, and like now you're like, okay, this guy's a bit of a threat, and it ends up being like kind of like more of an elite mob type of situation. Maybe some of that's education on the player. Maybe that's some of that was playing, too big of a strong build or something like that. But if you end up having more of the strength be between those bosses, then I feel like my opinion on whether or not the bosses need to be this big, dynamic, lots of mechanic thing going on starts to shift a bit. And I did feel that in my latest playthrough I was doing yesterday. Like I was saying, the guy like slaps you immediately. There was a point in which the game itself is like teaching me to make my build better. I also kind of like that there's pushback too, because a common complaint I see is like people are like, well, I don't like dying. Like I'm sick of dying. Like, I should be able to kill stuff. But the dying is a lesson that is telling you your character's not strong enough to continue. And then eventually in the game, you're going to have to create challenges. And if the player is basically babied all the way up to the point at which they finally run some challenge, they're going to hit this like immutable wall that they're going to quit at, because now they're at you. The game is actually like, okay, you made it to the point we're going to have to challenge you, but they didn't learn any lessons like along the way. They didn't have any moments of those pushback. They'll just hit the wall and be like, this is impossible or unbalanced or something, and they'll just quit. So all that basically to say like, yeah, I think I like it better after having played through it recently than previous. I didn't really go and like read Reddit and a bunch of forum posts and people's comments and all that stuff. So like, what was actually the take from the people who experienced the update? Am I in, common ground here, or am I wildly off?
It's very mixed. I'm not sure that everybody fully knows that this is actually our direction, because we haven't communicated that much about it, to be completely honest, right?
Sure.
We spoke about it in blog posts, but not everybody reads the blog post. Not everybody reads the main Steam page even. So people just have no way of knowing. We're not telling them in the game. There's a broad set of opinions, definitely. And I think there's a crew that's very up to date with everything we've put out. And yeah, they know. They know also that we are not there yet, but we are working towards it. And when we do put out content and updates that do work towards it, they typically appreciate it. I'm just really hoping that, it will work out. It is a gamble because it's not normal for the vast majority of ARPGs, but it's a gamble that, at least someone in my position, I'm happy to make it.
Wasn't it in the past notes you guys said you wanted the mobs to be memorable? Like you wanted to have a moments for people actually to have memorable, and like the one I'm saying where I got one shot or what have you. Like I did have that memory, and I have zero memories of the previous, like my first playthrough. I have zero memories of any mobs, but like that one I do remember. So like if that was what you were attempting to do, there was that moment. I also think that being able to distinguish between which mob I'm fighting is an important thing. it's not like I'm never really going to look at a pack of mobs and be like, I'm going to plan my route like I'm like some ninja that's going to do. But there is something about like looking at mobs and thinking this guy has this ability. Like I need to be aware of that. And if you don't have any of that at all in an ARPG, combat can feel flat. So I do understand where you're going with like these characters need to have some memory behind them. They need to have some design element behind them. In one of the games I'm playing, there's a guy that has a shield, and if you use a projectile skill and it hits the shield, he basically repels that. And that's like a fundamental mechanic, and you can very much die from that, even if you're strong enough to kill the mob like entirely, like he's just a trash mob, no problem. But that shield can kill you, so you have to be kind of aware of this. And I do like these because I'm mostly a hardcore like SSF player. Like that's primarily where I'm at home at in ARPGs, and I don't like it when there's cheesy one-shot mechanics, but I do enjoy when there is at least some part of like knowledge has room in the conversation when it comes to defeating mobs of certain types. And so if you guys are trying to design around that space more, I do find that appealing. Yeah,
Definitely. And as for these one-shot mechanics, we definitely don't try to do that. So even the Ichthian brutes that bonk you in that way, they're not going to take out your whole health bar. They're going to maybe down half of it, right? And you have your opportunity to dodge. You have your opportunity to interrupt or stun them or freeze them or whatever your CC mechanic is. We did design the game with significant counterplay and warnings in mind. That's why we also did the visual indicators on the ground when abilities are about to happen.
Hey, just out of my own curiosity here, since we're going, how do you feel about visual indicators? Like in a game like that, I know you gotta have them, right? I mean, they seem mandatory. Like if you're going to something's going to happen, you gotta have them. And at what point do you start feeling like, man, we're making an arcade game like that 1942 spaceship where you just have like shit all over the screen? Yeah, at what point do you start crossing that line where like, there's too many fucking red circles? You know what I mean?
Right. I mean, to be completely honest, I have an RTS background and I'm used to maximize telegraphing, right?
Sure.
In those kind of games, you have to react quick. But here, it's not necessarily the case. The thing I'm worried about is that if there's too many enemy types that can lay down some kind of ability, and we make our groups of enemies pretty damn mixed, right?
Yeah.
So you got your mages that with the Ichthians, for example, again, you've got the mages that can freeze you. Well, that's a delayed little thing that you need to get out of. Then you've got the brutes that can do the big slam. Then you've got the man catchers that throw a net at you, and you definitely don't want all those free to happen to you. That's definitely a kill. So because of that, and because we have things like hardcore mode, I think we have to have this.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be, rioting in the streets if we implemented an option to hide it. That would be probably okay. If you really want to, I mean, go ahead.
What's your take on dodge in ARPGs? Like, we don't even have to put this part in the video if you want, but I'm just like legitimately curious because this seems to be something that's like more and more and more common. Like, it's in PoE 2, it's in, I think D4 is the one that like broke the dam on this, right? So like now, dodge, and I'm noticing like skills like, okay, the first like tutorial griffin you guys have, you have a time just right, where the green circle's going, you got to dodge out of it just in time, right? If you don't dodge, you're kind of going to get hit. So like, do you feel like dodge is like putting you guys in a space where you almost have to make moves designed around dodge? Or do you feel like dodge in itself is actually like a good tool and you're glad it's in the tool bag?
We wanted it from the very beginning because of the active combat, and dodge. Dodge is just a really simple way to allow for all these very powerful abilities to happen. Likewise with the barrier. So we just wanted to theme it differently between the more agile characters and then the more magic heavy characters that can spec all the way into that magical defense if you want it. I mean, you can just not do it and become an absolute tank. You can do so with Forge Mastery especially. And if you add in some warfare or earth, both of them do have this defensive path within them. You can face tank, you can out regenerate if you really want to. It's a playstyle for us. But I have to say, I kind of feel about dodge like I do about FPS games and sprint. In the early 2000s, you had all these FPS games that didn't have sprint.
Yeah.
And again, Halo, my love. But look, you add it, and suddenly everybody will want that quick traversal.
Yeah.
It adds to the mechanics of the game, and when you don't have it, you kind of feel naked. So I'm not sure this is ever going back in Pandora's box.
Yeah, I'm a harm somebody. I think the cat's out of the bag on it. But the part that you mentioned right there, that's the part that interests me, where you say like you feel naked without it. But doesn't that feeling naked without it add like a leniency to positioning mattering? Like in Halo, right? It's like, okay, I don't have sprint. I don't have this, like, in my opinion, kind of bullshit. Like, I can, jump into a dodge and Superman across and run across the wall. Like, the movement tech that we're seeing everywhere in these FPSs now, right? It's like, I don't have all that stuff. So it's like, okay, maybe I don't have all this top end mechanical stuff, and maybe I'm a boomer and I just don't get it. Okay. But like at back then, it's like where you actually are choosing to put yourself mattered more, because I don't have all this bullshit that I can do to, like, it, just run around at a million miles an hour. Like, I don't know what your take on that is, but it's hard. That's how I kind of feel. It's like, I like dodge. I get it. Like, the cat's out of the bag. I ain't going back. I understand. But like at some point, I'm kind of curious. Like, does that not take away from like what you're actually doing with your character?
It might be an artifact of our time.
True.
So there is that aspect to it, but I think we would have to severely limit the enemy designs if you didn't have dodge in our specific instance. Maybe the shooters will find their way back to sprintless gameplay at some point. I'm pretty sure some are doing that, but for us, I think it's good that we have dodge, because we can make our enemies a little bit more interesting. We can make the moment to moment a little bit more tactile and just be a bit more back and forth than the competition does.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I mean, you're right. I get the argument of like it allows you to do more impactful attacks. Like I've seen that in ARPGs. It's I do get the argument too. You think that really is Souls-like inspired? That people always go back to that when they talk about the dodge row and start to make its way in the RPGs. They always go back to Souls-like. You think there's truth to that?
I was actually gonna bring up Souls likes
Okay.
myself, because we had this whole crew. I was actually gonna talk about it with the feedback topic. They gave us this feedback when we initially released the information that we're gonna try to do this active combat kind of gameplay. And a lot of people were really unhappy about that. I totally get it, because Souls likes they're super challenging, right? Obviously, you have to learn the ins and outs and the exact movesets and your precise timings. We're not that difficult.
Yeah.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
We are definitely a lot more beginner friendly. We do want to offer some challenge, in terms of engagement level. When you're engaged, when you're in the zone, that's around the 60% difficulty mark, 6 out of 10. You're gonna feel good about yourself if you win. If you don't die, that's great, right? But Souls likes Elden Ring, yeah, you're gonna probably get your butt kicked a little bit. You're gonna mark the difficulty as a 9 or 10, especially when you're new. Once you get really good, then obviously that's evaporating slowly but surely. But we don't want to enter into frustration territory.
Sure.
That's
Yeah.
absolutely out of the question for us. It's never going to happen. If it does, it's a bug or something completely going wrong. Uh, we never intend for that. But we also don't want you to get bored because the game is too easy.
Yeah.
We want that middle ground of being a 6 in terms of difficulty at baseline, and then you're engaged, you care, you pay attention, but you're you're not out of your depths.
It's gonna be a hard like middle ground to walk though. Like it needs to
Very.
be, engaging enough but not too engaging. Like, that's a hard task, man. And then it's particularly in ARPG, because not only do you, like, okay, from a design space, sure, but then also like you can't let builds get out of control. Or you can't have some builds be too strong that someone just happens to start the game and pick the wrong, one, and then the whole game gets invalidated.
Once again, it goes back to the trope of we do what we can with what we have, but we have our little backup systems. So if you happen to find something that doesn't suit, your current environment, and your experience goes off in either direction, it might be too easy to too hard, depending on what you've done, you can just go to the rituals. So that's a little fail-safe that you can use and self-balance the game without our intervention, which I think is just a fantastic little backstop in case something doesn't go the way we intend.
All right. Well, thank you very much for coming on to the interview and answering my, long laundry list of questions here. I appreciate your time. And any last comments or anything you want to see to the people that watched?
No, that was a wonderful conversation. I really want to thank you for inviting me. I guess I'll just tell the viewers that the game is available right now on Steam and Epic. We are still in early access, and the pricing, because of the early access, is lower than the full retail price will be. So getting it early equals discount. Consoles, we will eventually get there for
Okay.
1.0, soon TM. It's going to be a while, but you can already play on the PC versions with a gamepad. That's in. Multiplayer is in. We've officially included that in the recent builds. So go ahead, enjoy.
There you go. Try that with a friend. Available on Steam. Titan Quest 2. All right. Thanks so much for coming. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.